Reports from Pyongyang indicate North Korean military forces have staged a violent coup.
Solano is giving a press conference. Let's join that in progress.
It is time! The Venezuelan people...
Troops poured across the DMZ and into North Korea, intent on dislodging the newly installed regime of General Song.
They pay dearly for our oil. From this day forward, every morning pays!
Matthias, are you ready?
I'm always ready. Always ready.
When Pandemic Studios was founded in 1998, the fledgling company took whatever work they could find to keep themselves busy. Before they were making bangers like Star Wars Battlefront, they were making Army Men sequels and baseball games. Pandemic's early work spurred a partnership with EA Games, who offered them the chance to revive one of its dormant franchises. That franchise was Desert Strike. The original Desert Strike was an isometric title that put you in the cockpit of a helicopter. The sequels took gamers into the jungle and the Soviet Union. This revival would bring the action back to the desert. It was tentatively called Desert Strike 2, and we got quite far along in proof of concept. It was top-down like the original and fully 3D because it was for the PlayStation 2. It was looking really awesome. Development was moving smoothly on Desert Strike until GTA 3 hit. GTA's success spurred EA to turn Desert Strike from a 3D reimagining into a sandbox shooter. The game now included a mechanic where if your helicopter was shot down, your pilot would eject and continue on foot. The decision to make it more open world soured the relationship between the two companies. The first few iterations mimicked the isometric perspective of the classic game. But with every deliverable, EA requested the camera to be tilted more toward the horizon, making it more like a traditional third-person shoot-'em-up. By this time, the game had lost most of its connection with Desert Strike. We would make what they wanted, but after every milestone we delivered, they would change the game design. EA lost interest and abandoned the project. EA and Pandemic parted ways on Desert Strike, but not before working out a deal that allowed them to keep the work they had done. We ended up parting ways on that project, and this is probably some smart dealing on Josh's part. Somehow we had some sort of deal where we were able to keep the source code we had made for the game and still use it. We were able to walk away from that deal, which is crazy because at that time, and this is still probably true today, but you're a small studio and you have a contract from EA to work on one of their major IPs and you just say no to them. My memory was we had a team vote. We got in a room and talked about this and asked, should we do it? Everyone gave their 2 cents and we decided to step away. With source code in hand, Pandemic Studios started a new project. No longer would their game be set in the Middle East. No longer would it star John Army Man as the protagonist. Instead, their game took place in North Korea. The main character wasn't a soldier of duty, but a mercenary hired by a private military contractor to go in, stop North Korea's leader from unleashing nuclear war, and earn a big payday for their work.
Easy, boy. Just don't forget about our payday, okay?
Forget the $100 million. Impossible.
Under the codename ProCat, their new game took a different approach from other open-world games of the time. Where titles like Grand Theft Auto and True Crime focused on the criminal underworld, ProCat, or as it would later be called, Mercenaries, took a rip from the headlines approach. North Korea is in turmoil after its leader, President Choi Kim, is assassinated by his son Choi Song after Kim tries moving North Korea towards democracy. Things escalate when the cache of nuclear arms is discovered in a freighter, causing the the Allied nations to launch an invasion. As one of 3 mercenaries, you work with the various factions, pulling strings so you can find Song's rank and file and verify them. Whether they're dead or alive is up to you. We wanted the game and the world to feel ripped from the headlines, but with the kind of heightened and absurd character of an action movie. The game was developed during the Iraq War, so those were some of the headlines we were reacting to. Cameron Brown was the game's creative director. Aside from leading the team, he chose North Korea as the setting due to his personal experiences. The idea of setting it in North Korea came from me. I had recently visited the DMZ between North and South Korea and was fascinated by how unique and weird it was. I was surprised that there weren't really any games that were set in North Korea, and it seemed like an interesting setting for an over-the-top action game, so that's what we did. Mercenaries toyed with concepts that hadn't been tackled before. While you could go anywhere and do anything, you also had a bounty board of targets to go after called the Deck of 52. Plus you had multiple factions to work with, all vying for a piece of North Korea.
Why, we're still getting the crap shelled out of us. And I don't want to hear the words authorization, approval, clearance, or Now who the hell is this?
Mercenaries Deck of 52 was based on the real-life Deck of 52 used during Desert Storm and the Iraq War. The idea was to take the Middle East most wanted and familiarize them using an everyday item, in this case, a deck of cards. This real-life idea served as the basis for Mercenaries' fictional bounty system. It came to be because we were looking for a good structure. We needed some sort of framing for the game. Karen had heard about how in Desert Storm, the soldiers would get these decks of cards, and the idea was these soldiers, they play cards all the time. You get the soldiers familiarized with the most wanted faces by putting them on these cards. That was the basis of it, and that seemed like a really good structure. It built in an enumeration system and a hierarchy system. It gave you structure, it gave you hierarchy, so it seemed like a good fit. The Deck of 52 was a real-world concept used by the military during the Iraq War in 2003. Setting aside the propaganda and tonal issues of the real version, for a video game it was a strong concept. Gotta Catch 'Em All has been a universal concept since near the inception of the industry and gelled well with the open world design.
Perfect. 1 down, 51 to go.
Mercenaries features 5 factions: the Allies, South Korea, China, the Russian Mafia, and the North Koreans. The North Koreans are a constant threat, whereas faction relations differ depending on your standing with them. According to lead designer Robert Jordovich, the team took steps to ensure the faction system didn't become too complicated, and they made sure each one had their own look and feel. China was the more straightforward power fantasy, South Korea was the covert spy fantasy, the Mafia was the unstable crime and the war zone fantasy, and the Allied nations were the good guys involved with the press and civilian population. Robert Jordovich and Matt Colville deserve a lot of credit for figuring this out. We did a bunch of research and iterative thinking about what a fictional conflict might look like, i.e., who were the likely players and what would they want. The whole thing is a caricature and massive oversimplification, but it works as an action movie kind of reality.
Here's the ace up my sleeve. I hope you like being rich, because I got another sweet contract for you.
If a mercenary is going into a war zone, he needs some toys to play with, and Mercenaries' mixture of vehicles, weapons, and airstrikes offers plenty. The team's goal was to give the player a challenge while encouraging them to figure things out on their own. Would the player drop a payload of bombs to clear out a roadblock, or would they use a subtler approach? Our core design mantra was what, not how, which basically means presenting the player with a challenge and encouraging them to find their own way through things. Encounters were designed thinking about limitations in the same way the endgame entities would. Airstrikes are a major power fantasy. The player was essentially a wizard with powerful spells called from the sky, but balanced against more consistent player mechanics in a tank or a helicopter. The anti-air mechanics were a big part of flow balance. The idea being we throw a curveball to the player's flow so they change up their tactics to deal with them. I was very enthusiastic about making everything blow up. My taste in games is visceral. I like mechanics, action, physics, so I wanted to make the player feel awesome and powerful. In my mind, the target Mercs player was someone who was maybe a bit bored and frustrated after a day at school or work, and who would appreciate just having this awesome sandbox of destruction to play with. It's cathartic to blow shit up. Though Mercenaries was an exciting project to work on, it wasn't without its challenges. The biggest one was that for many, this was their first major title, and an open world one at that. This led to several struggles getting the game to run on 6th-gen hardware. It was the first open world game any of us had worked on, as far as I know. We had been making our first major console game, so that was a challenge. There were plenty. The ones I remember most was squeezing this giant, fully destructible open world onto a PlayStation 2 with 32 megabytes of RAM. We had to stream the world off a DVD, and they are slow. Ultimately, the speed of vehicles and mercs, especially flying vehicles, was determined by how fast we could stream data off the DVD. It was still the early days of developing open-world action games, so none of us really knew what we were doing and had to invent solutions along the way. For Mercs 1, being able to stream the game off a disc was a constant challenge, and developing tools that allowed everyone to work on the world together was something we had to invent. One interesting challenge Mark Domowicz remembers was nailing the main menu. The team had tried a bunch of stuff but couldn't land on anything, until he got an idea. One day, I had the idea that it would be cool if the front end was just a camera going through an environment. We could make it look cool, so let's try and do that. I'm speaking for myself, but this is indicative of the enthusiasm we had on this team. But I came in on the weekend and implemented a proof of concept for the front end. It's funny because the front end and title screen are usually the first thing someone sees, but we couldn't get it right until we ultimately did. Mercenaries was intended to have a holiday release, but some last-minute revisions resulted in it being pushed to January. The game took a little longer to come together, and we launched in January 2005 instead. At the time, launching in January was unheard of, but it was another idea Jim Ward championed. It was definitely a risk, but it gave the game the airspace it deserved and turned out to be an excellent launch window for a new IP.
Hey Matthias, my name's Fiona, your ex-op support coordinator for this mission.
What's the deal? We're almost there yet?
Nice to meet you too.
Every game needs a publisher, and Mercenaries wound up being LucasArts. The company was already working with them on Star Wars Battlefront when they were pitched the project. Sharon Miller was the game's producer and oversaw several aspects that Pandemic couldn't cover. This included QA, casting, music, localization, etc. A good publishing producer is hopefully a bridge between the developer and the publisher, being a total champion and advocate for the game, and helping to ensure that both sides are meeting the needs of the other in an effective, respectful, and with any luck, joyful way. Mercenaries was an exciting project for Miller, who loved how the game was a breath of fresh air from other sandbox games at the time. Some of her personal highlights included getting to participate in the sound effects recording sessions and even convincing Cameron Brown to let his wife be the voice of Fiona. We had the privilege of hiring a couple of gun handlers and renting a host of high-powered weapons, everything from sniper rifles to a 50 cal. We rented out a firing range, and then I went on the most fun shopping spree of my life. Car doors, toilets, giant blocks of ice, mattresses, watermelons, you name it, our team shot it and recorded the audio. When it came to marketing Mercenaries, Miller recalls that working PR was fun because of how different it was from the rest of LucasArts' catalog. She sat in on the pitches for the game's commercials and is the reason why we got such banger advertisements. Doing press for the game was a cinch because all she had to do was put the controller in somebody's hands, and it didn't take long for them to be sucked in. Publisher-developer relations can sometimes be a strenuous experience, but in Mercenaries' case, this was an instance where they didn't just support the project, they championed it. There will always be some amount of unpredictability and periods of high-intensity effort in the creative process. People who don't work in game development don't understand just how difficult it is to create a fun game that is also performant on hardware. There's going to be that moment, several of them on any given game, when what you thought was going to work just doesn't, and then you have decisions to make. There were a few times on Mercenaries where, if the team hadn't acknowledged what wasn't working and pulled out all the stops to address it, players probably wouldn't have remembered the game at all.
So they seem a little wigged out to you?
The hanged man will kick at anything when the news noose starts to tighten around his neck. That's an old Viking saying, which means, yeah.
Mercenaries went through several ideas during production. The biggest change was its structure. Originally, the game was going to be split between 4 provinces, with each suit of cards occupying said territory, but it was scaled back to just the northern and southern provinces. Other things cut included planes and the idea that outcomes could change depending on what the GSRN reporter saw. Dedicated Mercenaries fans discovered an unused island in the Ace of Diamonds mission. This island, nicknamed Blood Island, was the original map and would have seen the player-free prisoners that were being used for experimentation. This was the extent of my cut content discussion in my original Mercs video, but that changed earlier this year. An anonymous user uploaded the entire Mercenaries source code to the Internet Archive. This not only included all the files, assets, and docs, but other things like editor tools for Pandemic's Zero engine. This gave the Mercenaries community a wake-up call, and fans began combing through the files and uncovering all sorts of goodies. Remember the Indiana Jones and Han Solo skins? Those were meant to be playable characters, complete with their own dialogue.
That's what happens when you hire gangsters to oversee criminals. Gangsters don't scare me. Snakes do. Pesky is having 50 tarantulas drop onto your back. That's pesky.
Did you know there are several unused conversations between Fiona and the mercenary?
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Tank.
Tank. Who?
You're welcome.
I've killed people for making jokes funnier than that one.
Or that there was going to be an epilogue where the mercenaries stopped one of the faction leaders from deploying Slong's nukes.
Holy crap, what was that?
The South Koreans launched the nukes.
Those nukes are going to hit Seoul in less than 20 minutes.
Why did they do it? And now he's going to take it out on the city of innocent people. Talk about a sore loser.
I've picked him up on my satellite. Get to Cheongju fast, and I'll keep homing in on his location. What the hell are the South Koreans doing with Kim? Time's running out. You've got to get Kim to the AN base. You can transmit the abort codes there. Hurry!
The source code and everything it comes with gives us the most detailed look at how Mercenaries was made and opens the door to a possible remaster.
You are a mercenary in a playground of destruction. Hijack any vehicle. Use any weapon. Blow up anything. Blow it up again. Blow it up again. Blow it up again. Keep blowing stuff.
Mercenaries Playground Destruction was released on January 10th, 2005 for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. Critics praised the game for its chaotic action and surprisingly deep gameplay. Commercially, the game sold over 1.5 million units across both platforms.
It's not too bad for a day's work.
For the Mercenaries team, it was satisfying seeing the game's success. We knew we had a good game, so we were hopeful for the audience responding, but they responded beyond our dreams. I heard through the grapevine that my idol, Sid Meier, had mentioned it as one of his favorite games that year. We thought the game would get ignored. Fortunately, it was a lot more successful than we expected. It's funny because we knew we were making something amazing. We just felt it. We were all enthusiastic about the game we were making, and we were trying to make noise, but it was true then and it's true now. It's hard to get attention for something that isn't attached to a familiar name. We were a new thing. We went to E3, but there wasn't any buzz around the game, and I was worried we were going to put it out there and people would be like, eh.
Oh, stop, you're gonna make me bust out crying.
Where I felt it was turning around was when the commercial came out. In my mind, at least, the commercial turned things around and made people go, oh shit, this game looks cool. Suddenly, people cared about what we were making and it took off from there. Mercenaries asked the question, what would happen if Grand Theft Auto had a child with Modern Warfare? The result is one of the genre's most unique and explosive experiences. I didn't grow up playing GTA. My parents weren't okay with me gunning down innocents, but they were okay with me leveling North Korea. I loved Mercenaries for its destruction. This game might be pushing 20, but damn is it still satisfying to destroy buildings with C4 or send vehicles flying with a well-placed tank shell. Mercenaries revels in its chaos, which teenager me loved and adult me still loves. But there's another reason I love Mercenaries, its design. Yes, you spend the game gunning down North Korean troops and carpet bombing enemy bases, but you're also juggling relations with different factions.
A mercenary, violence for profit. The two hallmarks of Western ideology together in one package.
Mercenaries balances risk with reward. Do you work with the Chinese and draw the ire of the South Koreans? Or do you stick with the Russian mafia because they supply you with all the good stuff? It's easy to understand, but not complicated to the point that it requires a spreadsheet. Mercenaries' freedom of choice extends to the missions. Some are as simple as destroying targets, while others require a more methodical approach. I didn't pay this much attention to the nuances when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I appreciate how diverse its design is.
You ever dealt with weapons inspectors? They can be very anal.
That's great. I love spending time with professional pains in the ass.
I also love hunting for HVTs. The game doesn't mark them on your radar until you're within close proximity. You must rely on faction emails, or Google, to find them. It feels good when you track down an elusive HVT, and especially awesome when you find them all and get cheap weapons as your reward.
I know it's not state of the art.
Well, it kills people, right?
There are other reasons to like Mercenaries. The North Korea setting is refreshing because it's a place few have seen, so to explore an in-game version is quite fun. And no discussion of Mercenaries would be complete without mentioning its epic music. From the bombastic opening theme to the somber music, Michael Giacchino and Chris Tilton did a fantastic job capturing the intense action of the game and the bleak hopelessness of its setting. Mercenaries Playground Destruction is one of those lightning in a bottle games we rarely see. It takes a familiar genre and meshes it with new ideas, resulting in one of the open world genre's best games ever. And when lightning strikes once, surely it must strike twice, right?
I am a mercenary.
I am a mercenary.
I'm a mercenary, and I love my job. Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction, in stores January 13th, rated T for Teen.
It is time the Venezuelan people stop paying for the greed of foreign interest. We will make them pay dearly for our oil. From this day forward, everybody pays.
Yeah, everybody pays. Blanco Campo. You.
Viva Venezuela!
Everybody pays.
After production wrapped on Mercenaries, the team took time off to work on various projects. Creative director Cameron Brown flew out to Australia to help Pandemic Brisbane finish Destroy All Humans. The rest of the team started on another project, The Saboteur. Work officially started on Mercenaries 2 in late 2005, and like any sequel, the team pushed theirs to be bigger and better.
Marxist, Maoist, capitalist, everyone loves relying on me until the bill comes.
Pandemic wanted to shake things up with Mercenaries 2. Instead of taking place in the gloomy North Korea, the sequel was set in sunny Venezuela. In the game, the mercenary gets a job offer from the businessman Ramon Solano. Things go south when Solano refuses to pay up and orders the mercenary to be killed. The mercenary narrowly escapes, but not before getting a kiss on the cheek.
Nice.
Fueled by revenge, the mercenary sets out to dismantle Solano's newly formed regime. The team wanted to up the ante, and the power of the 7th-gen tech gave them the extra horsepower they needed. They also wanted to add in new mechanics, namely co-op. Yet making Mercenaries 2 was a difficult experience. New hardware meant new challenges, the biggest of which came from a simple decision that turned into a big mistake.
Gotta be kidding me!
The first Mercenaries was developed using Pandemic's Zero engine. For Mercenaries 2, the team built an all-new engine, which ate up development time. What should have been a smooth experience became a never-ending headache. The project did not go well on so many levels, and the end result was a product that we were not happy with compared to our first game. We made the choice to build Mercs 2 on a new engine, rather than reusing the Mercs 1 technology. That was a mistake.
No, I mean, yes.
Mark Domowicz feels part of the reason why Mercenaries 2 stumbled was because of Pandemic's sudden success. Pre-Mercenaries, they were an up-and-coming studio. But after games like Mercenaries and Star Wars Battlefront, they were the next big thing, which put a lot of pressure on the studio to deliver the goods. It was interesting because Mercenaries 2 was on the next-gen platforms. There was a console generation gap, and in that time, Pandemic was in a situation where we had shipped 4 or 5 multi-million selling titles in a row. It was insane, and the company felt like we could do no wrong. What happened is all our philosophies and game design production strategies ended up getting calcified. We were like, we know how to make games, and this is how you make games. The problem was we calcified the good with the bad. To be fair, not everything was bad for the PlayStation 2 era. When you jump to the next generation, not everything is going to be the same way. That was a lesson we had to learn the hard way. We spent a lot of time, money, and head aching struggling as we tried to create a next-gen engine from scratch, and that was a big mistake. Another area the team struggled with was the story. They had figured out the who and what, but couldn't decide on why and how.
How come China has all of Universal Petroleum's refineries and your boys aren't trying to stop?
Appearances. The world is watching, and I'm under orders not to seem too eager to get the oil.
It's no secret Mercenaries 2 has a paper-thin plot, but it's also noticeable for its change in tone. The first Mercenaries had a grounded feel, while Mercenaries 2 is a Michael Bay flick, light on subtlety, heavy on the airstrikes. I don't know if that was intentional. I'm not sure we were like, let's change the tone. I don't think that was the case. I'll say this, we struggled with the story. While the first game was great with an authentic military setting, it was a bit dry, and there was a hypothesis that a setting with a brighter palette and more of an over-the-top attitude would be more compelling. Matthias was very popular with the audience and was inherently over the top, so there was an idea we could shift the tone more in his direction. It was an ongoing conflict, however. We didn't quite resolve the tone in Mercenaries 2, and it shows in the final product.
This isn't funny.
Cameron Brown admits the success of the first Mercenaries put him in a creative paralysis, and that paralysis made it harder to tell a compelling story. The decision to make the mercenary a lone wolf instead of part of a corporation didn't help things either.
My soldiers are happy you work with us. It gives them confidence in our struggle.
Yeah, everybody has confidence when I'm around.
Mercenaries 2 went through several revisions. In one version, the mercenaries sought revenge against their PMC after being left for dead. This included a new deck of 52 where the bounties were everyone who worked at the company. The story we ended up with had several moments axed. Remember Acosta, the leader of the rebels? There was going to be a mission where you worked with the allies to find her and verify her. When the mercenary goes after Solano, it turns out it's a trap as they narrowly escape an allied bombing run. In an interview with Wired, lead writer Matt Colville admits the story went through at least 10 revisions before they landed on the final plot, though as mentioned, several story beats were sacrificed.
Matthias, brother, good to see you again. It has been a long time since the car.
Yeah, I remember seeing your big ass as you ran away.
Mercenaries 2 started life without a publisher. Sharon Miller recalls there were talks of LucasArts returning, but that was nixed when Electronic Arts bought Pandemic's owner, Elevation Partners, for $860 million. This gave the company ownership of Pandemic Studios and BioWare, and found the former working again with the publisher, for better and for worse. When I asked the developers about EA's involvement, responses were mixed. Some like Scott Warner and Mark Domowicz don't remember them being too involved. When I asked Cameron Brown, his reply was simply very involved. The best answer I got came from Jordy, who explained, for the first part of development, Pandemic was part of a combined entity called VG Holdings along with BioWare. While having control of our own destiny had its advantages, it also meant we were responsible for elements that publishers had always handled, which created distractions. VG Holdings was purchased by EA, so in some sense that was resolved, but EA had its own peculiarities as a publisher. The metaphor I used was that we were the ones walking the tightrope, and EA was responsible for what was below us. Sometimes it felt like a safety net, and other times it felt like a volcano.
Yeah, he's kind of a pain in the ass, but he'll do the job and he will never stop.
Like LucasArts before, EA put a lot of effort into marketing Mercenaries 2. This included elaborate E3 booths, promotional tie-ins including a comic book and a mobile game, and even a free gas event for people living in Los Angeles and the UK.
More money for me!
Mercenaries 2 went through several ideas. I mentioned the earlier story concepts, but those are just the tip of the iceberg. Much of the following information comes from a copy of the game's treatment that was provided to me by one of the developers. It mentions several gameplay ideas that were later scrapped. Mercenaries 2 was going to turn up the heat, literally. Fire was going to be an integral part of combat, with the player able to start fires using fuel trails from leaking canisters or vehicles. It was something the team pushed for and was featured prominently in early builds, but it ended up getting cut due to technical constraints. Swimming was going to be a more in-depth mechanic, with the player capable of diving underwater and vice versa. Concept art shows there were going to be underwater bases and vehicles. Ultimately, swimming was scaled back. Each faction was going to have its own mini-games. These included arm wrestling, fire spitting, and a drinking contest involving a living scorpion. There was going to be a day-night cycle, but it was cut. Planes and VTOLs were set to appear, but they were cut. Even the option to shoot a firearm while driving was cut. I could go on and on, but the point is a lot of good ideas were thrown out daily.
Verify the target, and the money's yours. So, what's it gonna be?
After several delays, Mercenaries 2 World in Flames released in August 2008 to mixed reviews. Some critics loved the explosive action, while others criticized its many shortcomings. This sentiment was shared by those at Pandemic. Being honest, I'm sour about the second one. I'd say most were disappointed, but we expected the reaction we received. It was very frustrating at the time, but time heals all wounds.
Yeah, what the hell? I'll take it.
We weren't surprised, but disappointed. We knew the game was coming in hot for various reasons and understood it wasn't going to be as solid as the original. I think we were a bit disappointed, but not surprised. It was a difficult development, and we didn't get to the quality we all hoped for. Ultimately, as creative director, I take responsibility for that.
That stings a little.
Pandemic tried salvaging the game with 2 updates, the first of which fixed several issues, while the second one introduced new challenges and 2 mercenaries, Barack Obama and Sarah Palin. This is probably the thing people remember most about Mercenaries 2. That and "Oh no, you didn't!" Several devs I spoke with said their inclusion was done as an amusing tie-in to the 2008 election. Unfortunately, these skins weren't usable in the main game, and said DLC is no longer available. If the first Mercenaries is an example of lightning in a bottle, then Mercenaries 2 is an example of fun but flawed. It adds several new features, but makes just as many compromises. Let's start with the good. I like the bigger scale of the action. The combat is faster and can get chaotic, what with the bullets and mayhem unfolding around you. The airstrikes are louder, and the new toys are fun to mess with. There's something cathartic about barging into a VZ base, destroying everything in sight, before you then throw some smoke to give the all clear. As far as power fantasies go, Mercenaries 2 is one of the most destructive.
I need some marshmallows.
The music is once again great, with Chris Tilton contributing a score that mixes Latin rock with bombastic orchestral pieces. And can we all agree that "Oh no, you didn't" still slaps? But all this fun comes at a cost, the lack of polish. Mercenaries 2 is glitchy as hell. It's the little things, like how your helicopter pilot will endlessly hover over a target, or how enemies have the intelligence of a lemming. It's not an outright disaster, but it gives your average Bethesda title a run for its money.
Okay, you beat me. Back to sleep.
Story and characters have taken a hit. The first Mercenaries had a minimalist plot, but its world building drew you in. It was interesting seeing each faction's arc unfold, what with the growing rivalry between China and South Korea, or the shifts of power within the Russian mafia. I don't mind the sequel's more over-the-top approach, but what I don't mind is how paper thin it is. none of the characters, be it the mercenaries, the faction leaders, villains, etc., stand out. It doesn't help that no one shuts up for less than 5 seconds.
I'm going in! Ooh, I was hoping for a tag. Behind the cover! I hate Venezuela. Hot all the time.
I know it sounds like I'm harping on the game, but the truth is, I like Mercenaries too. I loved it as a teenager, but now that I'm older, I realize it's a game that takes 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. Is it fun to raise hell in Venezuela? Yes. But this fun comes with a big asterisk and the phrase that says, it's a bit janky.
Oh no, oh no, oh no.
Oh yeah!
Mercenaries 2 released in 2008, a time when the 7th console generation was in full swing and the 6th generation was on its way out. However, the PS2 was still going strong, and with over 160 million users, there was still a market for games. EA and Pandemic saw an opportunity and went for it. It's a thing that happens in the gaming industry where if you make a hit game, you want to extract the most profit from it. It's very cynical. When we were making Mercenaries 2, we were making it for systems that, at the time, didn't have a big install base. They were much smaller compared to the PlayStation 2's install base. So the idea was, even if we sold a small percentage to the PS2 base, you still make an enormous amount of profit. And the idea was we could take the engine from Mercenaries and combine it with the story and mission structure from Mercenaries 2. Maybe we could even share some assets. We can meld those and come up with Mercs 2 PS2. Pandemic search for an external developer first led them to Pi Studios, before it then got sent to Behavior Interactive, formerly known as Artificial Mind and Movement. Back when they were A2M, the studio cut its teeth creating licensed games and ports, which is how we got the odd duck that is Mercenaries 2 on PS2. Mercenaries 2 is an impressive port trapped in an unimpressive game. A2M did their best to reverse engineer Mercenaries 2, and it's a commendable effort, yet it doesn't take long to see how little time it was given to cook. It looks, feels, and plays like a worse version of the first Mercenaries. The missions are basic, the combat unexciting, and the hazy N64 quality graphics do little to impress. Neither do the barren cityscapes. That's not to say this game has its redeeming qualities. Because it's running on the first game's engine, things like health kits and ammo are vital for survival. I also like its version of the stockpile system. Obtaining supplies involves talking to contacts and completing missions for them. The more missions you do, the more items you unlock for purchase. Any vehicles you bring to your headquarters are automatically added to your garage, and all the weapons you know and love from the first game are here.
I'm empowered to use any and all methods, including you.
It's fascinating to see how A2M condensed Mercenaries 2. Several missions are shuffled around, scaled back, or are completely absent. A good example are the recruiting missions. Instead of blowing up a base for Misha, you steal a sports car back. To recruit Ewan, you find him in the jungle and protect him as he slowly flies back to the base.
Kinky stuff. Let me know how that goes then.
I think the funniest change is the final mission. Spoilers ahead, but in the next-gen version, you drop a nuclear bunker buster on Solano's base and have a final Q2E showdown with them. In the PS2 version, you drop the nuclear bunker buster and the game ends.
I guess now's your chance. Nobody's going to turn away a contract on Solano now. Nuclear bunker buster or not.
I initially wrote Mercenaries 2's PS2 port off, and while it is a bad game, I kind of like it, in a morbidly curious kind of way.
You do, huh?
It's great seeing what the Mercenaries community has done to improve this game. Fans are currently working on an overhaul project dubbed Mercenaries 2 World in Flames Reflamed Edition. It's a mod that aims to fix the performance and add new content. Plus, their efforts to data mine the game have uncovered several unused characters and vehicles, showing A2M had greater ambitions, but were unable to realize them.
Okay.
Mercenaries 2 on PS2 is terrible, but if you're a sucker for weird ports like I am, give it a shot.
Matthias, how do you feel about India?
Okay, but this time we get paid in advance.
Mercenaries 2 wasn't the huge success the team hoped for, but it did well enough to warrant continuing the series. During an investor call, then EA CEO John Riccitiello told investors, "There will be a Mercenaries 3, and if I have anything to do with it, there will be a Mercenaries 10.
We're doing it for a shitload of money!
Pandemic planned to expand Mercenaries beyond consoles and onto handhelds. Producer Mark Domowicz remembers pitching possible Mercenaries games for the PSP and DS. The intent was to make them both top-down action games, with the PSP version being open world while the DS version would be more linear. Neither project progressed past the prototyping stage. As for the next sequel, Mercenaries 3 No Limits would have taken the series global. Set in the year 2017, the third game was slated to have levels set in Cuba and the United States, among others. The cast was going to see a shakeup, with new mercenaries being introduced, with the originals returning in supporting roles. When asked who the new mercs would be, the one that designer Scott Warner remembers most is a Native American merc who features prominently in the leaked gameplay footage. No Limits gameplay was going to introduce new vehicles like mechs, as well as a weapon combining mechanic that creative director Cameron Brown describes as not too dissimilar to the fusibility in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. In the Mercs 3 prototype, you could do things like strap RPG launchers to your car and use them to jump and fly. The fuse mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom reminds me of what we were trying to do with Mercs 3. While one team worked on Mercenaries 3, another team worked on a multiplayer spin-off called Mercs Inc. This team-based multiplayer game pitted rival factions of mercs against each other in an assortment of modes. Both Mercenaries 3 and Mercs Inc. spent about a year in development, with Mercenaries 3 slated for a tentative 2010 release. Work on Mercenaries 3 and other projects came to a halt in late 2009. EA, faced with various financial setbacks, closed Pandemic Studios. The studio's Brisbane division had been closed earlier that year, and the Los Angeles studio faced the same fate that November. Almost 230 employees were let go, with a handful sent to EA LA to continue work on Mercs Inc., which never saw the light of day. After barely a decade in business, a promising studio was cut short.
Okay, now we can go.
Well, all right. Okay, job well done. All safe and sound.
15 years have passed since its closure, but the legacy of Pandemic Studios and the Mercenaries franchise lives on. The first game was added to the Xbox's list of backwards compatible titles and is readily available to purchase on current Xbox systems. Mercenaries maintains a loyal following, with a community devoted to exploring, modding, speedrunning, and talking all things Mercenaries. The people who worked on the games continue to work in the industry, but the series, especially the first game, remains a high point in their careers. There are a lot of super expensive and compelling game experiences out there, but the best ones do what games do best, which is letting the player be in control of something interactive in a way that is surprising but also makes sense. The design philosophy of the games was to tell the player what needed to be accomplished, but not how to do it. The games are rarely on rails. You have a lot of freedom to explore and experiment. We approach the games as an activity rather than just a challenge.
Just like gophers. They pop their heads out and I give them a nasty surprise.
Well, I think it's a fun game. The team did an amazing job. I find it really gratifying that there are groups devoted to mercs, speedrunning communities, etc. I've chatted with some of them. They were wonderful and very nice, and they know more about the game than I did. It starts with being a good game, I think. I think it goes back to what I said before, and maybe I'm just imagining it, but you can tell the team loved that they were making it. You can feel the heart, the soul, the energy, and the late nights. There were some very, very late nights, some all-nighters for sure, and it wasn't because anyone was telling us to. We were going to work for it, and I feel like you can sense that in the final product. This has been the Complete History of Mercenaries. I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who was interviewed for this project. These interviews helped shed light on the making of Mercenaries and the highs and lows that came with it. Special thanks to the Mercenaries community for their dedication to the series and their support for this documentary. A huge thanks to everyone who watched this video. When I set out to make this documentary, I didn't just want to make it bigger, I wanted to make it better. There was a lot of room for improvement, and in my opinion, I think I succeeded. And I want to give a huge thanks to Pandemic Studios. They may be gone, but their legacy lives on in Mercenaries and beyond. Thank you for watching.